Will Rogers once famously said, "I never met a cookie I didn't like." Or was that, "I never met a man I didn't like"? Well, if he didn't say it, he should have said it. And it's true for me, well, mostly. I don't like raisins in my cookies. And I'm not fond of commercially made cookies either. I think it's because my mother put all sorts of these things in my lunch when I was younger, and they were always in the house. And they're dry and crumbly. I think everybody should have a good homemade cookie recipe in their repertoire. So, welcome to the basics. Covering cookies would be an encyclopedic endeavor. There are so many different versions and cooking methods to it that we just don't have the manpower to do that here. So today we're going to focus on drop cookies. Drop cookies are just what they say. You take a lump of your dough and you drop it on the sheet in order to bake it. They're the most flexible in their design. We can change up the flavors the most with it. I think it's a good place to start. So let's get to it. Now, I have botched more cookie recipes than you can shake a stick at. Why? Because
baking is science.
it's not like cooking where you can add a dash of this or a cup of that and it'll just change the flavor a little bit. No, no, no. We're dealing with chemistry here. And if you change a dash of this or a cup of that, you'll end up with a puddle on your plate. So, for that reason, I'm going to be very exact, and I encourage you to as well. Now, as much as I'd like to reach for my fork in order to do all the mixing of this certain recipe, it's not going to cut it because we're going to use what's called the creaming method. So I need to reach for my stand mixer. This beauty in red back here is going to do all the beating for me. So I'm going to take the bowl from my mixer and I'm going to set it right on top of my scale. First of all, you're going to need half a cup of butter. Now, you heard me say I need to weigh that. It's true. Half a cup of butter is equal to 4 ounces. So I'm going to dump 4 ounces of butter at room temperature, please, into my bowl. Then I need 3 ounces of vegetable shortening. That goes into my bowl as well. I also need 5.5 ounces of dark brown sugar. Why dark brown sugar? Well, it has more molasses in it, and molasses is a type of substance that wants to pull moisture out of the air, so it keeps your cookie nice and chewy. I also am going to need 2 ounces of plain old white sugar. And now I'm going to take this and I'm going to attach it to my mixer with my paddle. Take that and beat it to death. Now my Canadian compadres are thinking, why are you dealing in ounces here? Well, ounces are nice round numbers in this case. I could give you the grams, or you can just go and do the calculations yourself. Or just flip your scale to ounces instead of grams, and it'll work just fine. You want to beat those together until it starts to lighten in color and looks nice and smooth. Then I'm going to take and add 2 eggs, one at a time, making sure that it's fully incorporated before I add in the next egg. Do this on slow so you don't get egg everywhere. Then you can turn it up. You might need to use your good old spatula to scrape down the bowl every now and then. Make sure it's nice and smooth before you go any further. Once it looks something like this, we're ready to add our vanilla. Vanilla is a strange thing. You see, when you take this certain plant and you prepare it in a certain way and add it in small quantities to baked goods and other sweet stuff, then the product tastes more like itself. But the problem is, vanilla is expensive stuff because of the plant and the process. A bottle this size is going to cost you close to 50 bucks. So, long time ago, scientists discovered that one of the active ingredients in vanilla is vanillin that makes it taste that way. And so they figured out that vanillin is present in other products in the world as well. So instead of extracting vanilla to make vanilla extract, they discovered they could extract it from all sorts of other things, like pine tree bark. So you can buy cheap stuff that looks like this, and it kind of, sort of, maybe tastes like vanilla. And I understand, because buying real vanilla is expensive. But there is an in-between spot as well. They now carry stuff called premium artificial vanilla, which they take somewhere between 10 and 15% of real vanilla and put it in with the artificial stuff, so that you at least are getting a little more of an authentic flavor. Or they're now developing these things called baker's extracts, which takes, again, a little bit of real vanilla and some other extracts like chocolate extract to put them together to give you an interesting flavor. So if you can get the real stuff, great. Try to avoid the pine tree bark. Maybe you can find somewhere in between. One teaspoon, please. All right, this ends the creaming part of our method. Creaming is when we take a solid fat and we add sugar to it so the sugar rips through the fat molecules and gives space for air. That way, when we add our leavening agents, which in this case is going to be baking soda, it will make that air expand and give us a nice texture to our cookie. It should look something like this. Now I'm going to take and add my dry ingredients on top of that. So we're going to take 12 ounces of all-purpose flour and add that to my work bowl. I'm also going to add the baking soda I just talked about, 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And finally, 1 teaspoon of salt. Now when you take this back to your mixer, don't turn it on high like we have previously. We don't want to overwork these cookies. So we are just going to turn this on its lowest setting and let it come together. Scrape down the bowl once to make sure that you get any extra flour. And then send the paddle around one more time. Once it looks like this, we can add the best part, the chocolate chips. Now here is the only part in the process where you can play fast and loose with your ingredients. I'm going to go with 8 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate chips. Some people like milk chocolate, others like different flavors. This is mine of choice. And you could even go with less or more of those because it's not really going to affect the chemistry of this particular cookie. We don't want these things pulverized, so I'm just going to put this on there to give it a quick mix, and then we should be ready to go. That's it. Now, if you haven't already done so, heat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Really, it's a good idea to do that before we start this whole process so your oven can warm up properly. But if you haven't, do it now. Let your batter sit. It won't really be detrimental to it. I'm going to need a nice flat cookie sheet. I use an aluminum one here, and I line my sheets with parchment paper. It's just paper that's been lined in silicone. That way the cookies slide off nice and easily, and it doesn't really burn in the oven, at least not through a couple of uses. You could use silicone sheets if you want. Try to resist using those non-stick things. They wear out quickly, and then you've got a mess with your cookies. To dole this out, I do want to reach for my fork again. That's what my mother and probably my grandmother used to do. But I have found this to be unreliable. So we're going with a disher. Choose a size that you enjoy and go for it. Mine here, I've got a 30 that I'm working with. If you use a 30, I can give you reliable cook times for this as well. Scoop and deploy. Make sure that your cookies don't end up too close together on your sheet. Otherwise, they touch, and again, disaster. Well spaced out, now into the oven. How do you know when your cookies are done? Well, it should be about 8 minutes, but otherwise you should look for, well, here, let me show you. I'm looking for a little bit of browning around the bottom edge of my cookie, and they should be just losing their shine up top. They should look just a tad underdone. A great chewy cookie is going to come out just a little bit underdone, so we maintain some of that moisture. So at this point, I'm going to grab my glove and I'm going to extract. Give those a minute or two to cool, and then use a spatula to transfer them over to a cooling rack. Still don't like the idea of using the scale to measure out your ingredients? Well, then here's a recipe that'll make your grandma proud. Take 1 full cup of butter at room temperature, again please, and add 2 cups of brown sugar. Doesn't matter if it's light or dark. And beat the same way again. Add 2 eggs, 1 at a time please. Add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. This time I'm using baker's extract. Make sure that gets mixed in. And now that my wet is fully combined and fully creamed, I'm going to add in my dry. So I'm going to go with 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 cups of quick oats, half a teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt, and 1 cup of shredded sweetened coconut flake. Combine that on your lowest setting. Scrape down the bowl once. Send it another time around the block. And finally, add in what our family calls the mix-ins. In this case, I'm going to, instead of add chocolate chips, I'm going to go with these guys. We fondly know them as Smarties here in Canada. They are chocolate that is candy coated, also known as Magic Wonderfulness. I'm adding in a cup of these things. or more. And turning my mixer on just for a moment to combine. Take your mix, scoop it out onto your tray just like you did the last ones, and bake for about 8 minutes until they look done the same way that your first batch of chocolate chip did. Voila! So what's my favorite way to enjoy one of these delicious morsels? Until next time, raid the cookie jar, as long as they're homemade.